You're watching News 24 Live. This morning we have Chief Rugby writer Rob Houwing back in studio with us. He's just returned from the pool stages of the Rugby World Cup. He's joined by editor Garen Lamley from Sport 24. He's off to England on Thursday for the playoffs. Gents, thanks very much for coming and good to have you both back on the couch.
Morning, Nick.
Hello, Nick.
Rob, I'll start with you, of course. Tell us, how was it? Some highlights for you?
Lots of highlights in the sense that the box couldn't go wrong while I was there.
Yeah.
I chose my timing pretty meticulously. If you think that I got in just after the Brighton disaster, and lots of sort of doom and gloom and uncertainty, arrived to a very kind of fragile Bok camp, if you like. And then, of course, things just picked up and picked up and picked up. And of course, we're now feeling pretty good about ourselves again. I wouldn't say South Africa sort of exactly installed as favourites yet, but up there, certainly in with a puncher's chance, I think. And you certainly, as the fortnight went on while I was there, you just sensed a sort of an increase in the sort of the optimism in the camp. The players seemed to get more relaxed as the sort of the ghost of Japan was kind of laid to rest. They started scoring some pretty good tries, despite going back to old Springbok methods, if you like, where things aren't always pretty, and they do sort of stamp their authority up front, literally in the pack. But then, let's not forget that the Boks have also run in some quite nice looking tries and involved the back line a little bit. So things aren't looking too bad. As I say, they're not, I don't think they're sort of favourites for the tournament, but we're looking at some cracking quarterfinals, and I think the whole knockout phase is going to be great. I was thinking of asking Garen if he wants to stay at home, and I'll nip back for the closing stages, but I don't think he'll be agreeable to that, so I'll leave him to it.
Well, just talking about, of course, that horrible opening defeat to Japan, I guess now that we've seen sort of the rest of their pool games, it wasn't maybe that much of a flash in the pan. And I mean, if it wasn't for Scotland's very narrow victory over Samoa, they would have been through to the quarterfinals. So Japan rugby really on the rise and the darlings of the tournament.
Yes, I mean, they are the sort of everybody's favourite sort of minnow side, which is a terrific achievement in itself. I don't think people would have predicted that too widely ahead of the tournament. And yes, you're quite right. I mean, they, in some ways, it wasn't as much of a disgrace as we made out that they lost. I certainly think the Springboks were caught cold. I think they were caught quite complacent, and a little bit perhaps sort of rusty. And we hadn't yet got our proper A team on the park. And that game was played without Messrs. Dupree and Vermeulen. Sort of the very important factors at number 9 and 8 for South Africa. So things, they've made, those two players alone have made a world of difference to the Boks since what happened in Brighton. And the Boks are certainly now sort of marching on with a lot more confidence in the tank.
So Garen, like I mentioned, you obviously are now sort of taking the baton, and you're off at the end of the week for the playoffs. The top 8 teams, is this pretty much how you sort of predicted it going, or have there been any big surprises for you other than what we've just covered?
Yeah, well, apart from, as Rob said, the Boks losing to Japan. Unfortunately for Japan, they won 3 games out of 4, the only team ever, I think, in Rugby World Cup history to do so and still not make the playoffs. So I feel a little bit sorry for them. Obviously the big upset, if you like, the hosts England going out again, the first host nation not to make the playoffs. But they were in the sort of pool of death with Australia, Wales, and England. One of them had to lose out. I think most people thought it might have been Wales, but it ended up being England. So as it turns out, South Africa are going to play Wales in the first quarter-final. But apart from that, I think all the other teams that made it were pretty predictable. I think it just really depended on who was going to finish top and who was going to finish second in the pool. So, they've been set. Some exciting matches ahead. We've got a Northern Hemisphere team versus a Southern Hemisphere team in every match, which is quite interesting. Obviously, from a Southern Hemisphere point of view, it would be great to see all 4 Southern Hemisphere teams go through. It'll end up sort of like a rugby championship scenario again. But it could well happen. I think that the only game where the Southern Hemisphere team won't be the favourite is perhaps the Ireland-Argentina game. But we've seen Argentina play some amazing rugby. They really ran New Zealand close in their one game. And I think outside of that, against the other teams in the pool, I think Argentina have been more impressive than the All Blacks. Ireland, they looked pretty good against France yesterday, but they did pick up some key injuries to some key players. The fly-off, Paul O'Connell out as well. One of the loose forwards, and then
but in spite of that, still really put France to the sword. So
France are this, the strangest team, in world rugby. They looked up for it in the first half, and then as they sort of couldn't break through the Irish defence, sort of let their heads hang a bit. They looked a bit fatigued towards the end, and they sort of, I don't want to say gave up, but they
Yeah.
knew they were going to go through to the quarterfinals. Now they've got a repeat of last World Cup's final against New Zealand. I think
They
they'll
love
certainly-
playing New Zealand in knockout games.
Absolutely, so they're certainly going to be up for that game. Anything
Yeah.
can happen. I expect them to bounce back, but they're also the sort of team that if New Zealand really click on the day, it could get a bit ugly for France. So difficult to call that game. Obviously you would think the All Blacks would be too good for them. They're playing the Millennium Stadium again, which I heard a crazy stat. I don't know if you heard this, Rob, that All Blacks have, since the 2007 debacle when they were sort of, I don't want to say cheated by Wayne Barnes, out of that, they played more test matches at the Millennium Stadium than in Christchurch and Dunedin combined, which is
Wow.
quite bizarre. So they're obviously on every tour that they go and play Wales at the Millennium Stadium.
Happy hunting ground.
It's sort of like a home away from home for them. I expect them to have a fair bit of support. I'm not sure what the Welsh crowd, if they have the tickets, feel towards France. But you sort of got now these neutral, with England out, you've got these neutral fans sort of, turning up in these massive stadiums to support, either of the two teams. So, yeah, really looking forward to the quarterfinals. Can't wait for them to get underway.